Thanks to our title sponsor, Juniper Networks, for helping make Research Saturday possible. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems of protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
Emotet has been around for several years now, but we can definitely say that in the last 12 to 18 months, it's really become one of the most prolific threat groups out there.
That's Shimon Oren. He's VP of Research and Deep Learning at Deep Instinct. The research we're discussing today is titled Why Emotet's Latest Wave is Harder to Catch Than Ever Before. And now, a quick word about our sponsor, Juniper Networks. NSS Labs gave Juniper its highest rating of recommended in its recent data center security gateway test. To get your copy of the NSS Labs report, visit juniper.net/securedc or connect with Juniper on Twitter or Facebook. That's juniper.net/securedc. And we thank Juniper for making it possible to bring you Research Saturday. And now, a message from our sponsor, Tanium. In a distributed cloud-based world, managing and protecting endpoints has never been more important. The Tanium endpoint platform provides real-time visibility, comprehensive control, and rapid response for endpoints across distributed operations. That's why the Department of Defense and half of the Fortune 100 trust Tanium to secure and manage their IT operations. Want to try for yourself? Visit Tanium.com/cyberwire to get a 14-day free trial of Tanium as a service. That's Tanium.com/cyberwire. And we thank Tanium for sponsoring our show. So what led to you all taking on this research here? What sparked your interest that you started this effort?
Well, what sparked our interest is again, first and foremost, the fact that Emotet is such a constitutes such a significant part of the current threat landscape, and over a year now, the fact that it's one of the malware families and malware campaigns we see most trying to attack the customers which we protect, and in general, just a very, very active campaign group. But other than that, what really interests us in Emotet from a pure professional standpoint is the fact that it's a very, very successful, so to speak, or for lack of a better word, it's a very, very successful malware campaign. It's very evasive. It's quite sophisticated, both from a technical standpoint, or I'd say even more so from a kind of a modus operandi standpoint, the way they operate as a group, and the way they go about, carrying on their operations.
Well, let's walk through your research together here. And you all began with some data samples, which you grouped into different categories.
Yeah, yes, I mean that's pretty much what we set out with. What we've seen in the second half of the summer of this year is a new and quite expansive attack wave. In general, at this point, I think it's worth mentioning that Emotet works in waves, and that's part of that interesting modus operandi that I just mentioned. Unlike other malware campaigns that have a certain period, it could be rather short. In some cases, if it's more successful, it can be a bit longer. But usually, they have a defined and rather specific period in time in which are active. Emotet has been quite different in that it comes and goes in waves. There are periods of very, very high activity where literally hundreds of thousands of variants are created and hundreds of thousands of targets are targeted and unfortunately in some cases infected. And then that's followed by varying periods, but usually longer periods than the periods of activity, but longer periods of just going completely under the radar and without almost without any kind of new targets being attacked or new variants or very few variants in any case being created. So what happened in the last summer is that we've seen one of these waves come out, and again, usually in each wave there's something new and different from again, technically speaking, in the malware itself. So we started to look into it because it's always interesting to know and to understand what's new with Emotet, and that's what led us to trying to try and again cluster these new malware variants that we've seen into different groups and trying to understand how and what exactly and in what way it differentiates from previous attack waves.
Well, let's go through it together. I mean, can you share the story with us? What did you find in this latest wave from Emotet?
So we found something very, very interesting. And one of our most interesting findings was the fact that Emotet actually uses and embeds into the malware sample that are propagated as part of this campaign, a lot of benign code and benign, or just simply, and what I mean in benign code is, and more specifically I'd say than that, is code segments or just different binary sequences that are found in operating system files coming from Microsoft or from other very, very popular or prolific benign software. And it does that specifically in an attempt to evade AI-based solutions that are more susceptible to that kind of attack, where if you inundate the malware samples with a lot of benign content, and especially benign content that AI solutions, or in general endpoint solutions for that matter, would very, very much want to refrain from triggering on, because they would deem as false positives. So having that kind of content be embedded in the malware sample really helps at evading security solutions. In a lot of cases, that was what happened. And we could see across multiple samples specific code segments taken from different Microsoft or Windows in general DLL and injected or embedded somehow into the malware samples. So that was one thing. And the difference between the different clusters that we found is that we found different clusters of that attack wave to just contain different types or different kinds or different content of actual benign code, whereas the malicious activity itself, the malicious code and the malicious business logic, were similar.
So the notion here, just for my own clarity, is that, say, an AI solution would be looking at the code and doing sort of spot checks to compare what it was finding against, a database of known good code, for example, and in doing this spot check, this avalanche of benign code would likely to throw it off the trail.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
Well, take me through the actual encrypted payload, the part of the malware that is specifically of interest here.
Yeah. So that's another part, by the way, of how and why Emotet is that successful. Because other than having most of the exposed content of the malware sample actually be benign code, or again functions taken from DLL or resources taken from Microsoft DLLs, etc. The malicious business logic is encrypted, at least as far as when you look at the file statically, nothing that's intrinsically malicious pops out because it's all encrypted. So again, if you look at it statically, what you have is a bunch of what would seem to almost everybody pretty much benign or even very, very benign content. And other than that, the rest would just be encrypted. What we did, and as part of our research, is understanding exactly where and how is that encrypted payload kept within the file. What is the flow that happens in runtime that decrypts it, and then runs a certain kind of shell code that then in itself decrypts another layer, which is where the actual malicious business logic resides. So you have multiple stages of decryption and deobfuscation that take place until something bad really starts to happen. But again, I mean, in runtime, it happens pretty fast. I mean, it's not it's not that it takes eternity, but when you come and look at it and try to reverse engineer it and then debug it, etc., it takes quite some time to figure out what's going on.
And can you walk us through? I mean, how did you reverse engineer the malicious part of the code here? How did you get into that encrypted data?
So again, it involved a lot of work with tools like IDA and other analysis tools running it on VMs and looking at with different types of memory forensic tools, trying to understand exactly what happens in memory as we continuously debug and run it and decompile it. It took quite some effort, especially again because there are several stages that take place until the full malicious business logic is discovered. So, and the main crux of it here is understanding where exactly is the decryption key found, and how is it, where exactly it appears in memory during runtime, where it's kept, and then how it's used to decrypt the content. That was the crux of what we needed to understand in order to fully analyze and then of course going on to explain and share with the community what's exactly going on there.
And then the final payload itself, I mean, there's quite a bit going on here, starting with some code obfuscation.
Yeah, I mean, even once you get to the malicious business logic itself, it's not that life becomes very, very easy, because again, the people behind Emotet are very, very aware, and other than what I'd call evasion techniques, which is again, the benign code and the encryption that when you look at the file statically, you don't really see the malware itself. They use a lot of other techniques that are more geared towards anti-reversing, anti-debugging, and making the researcher's life harder, even once they've already understood that this is malware and they're analyzing it. So yeah, it's not that it becomes easy. It's pretty good code, and there are a lot of additional internal obfuscations and different kind of fuzzing, I'd say, methods that lie in there that makes our lives as researchers harder. But we're happily used to it. So, or fortunately, we're used to it. Sometimes it just it doesn't necessarily make things impossible. It does make them harder and slower. But we're persistent, just as they are.
And so the ultimate functionality of Emotet, of this payload, is what? What is it setting out to do here?
Okay, so that's actually an additional very, very interesting piece. So if we look at the way Emotet has evolved over the course of of its activity, so it set out and it started as your run-of-the-mill or your day-to-day financial malware, doing things like credential harvesting, especially from financial or banking related accounts, and user data, acted as again spyware, trying to just collect data, collect files, look at your emails, look at your addresses, things that are very, very important in order to keep the attack chain going, to gain more data on more targets. But then as it became that successful, and as evasive as it is, and really malware, if you look at Emotet in general, it's one of the malware campaigns with the highest infection rates. Then what it become is, it's now Emotet is more of a platform for other second stage malware to come after it. And now the thing is, even if that second stage malware in and of itself is not that successful, is not that evasive, doesn't have that high of an infection rate, once the machine has already been compromised and infected with Emotet, and Emotet, does its thing on that machine, lowers security settings, completely removes different kind of security software, escalates privileges, etc., it's pretty easy to then, land whatever type of malware that we want onto that compromised device, and then do, pretty much as we wish. That's one of the reasons why we've seen so much collaboration happening between Emotet and ransomware campaigns, especially Ryuk, which we also mentioned somewhere in our research blogs. Ryuk has become a very common second stage after an Emotet infection, whereas Emotet comes in, does everything that it normally does, taking out data, compromising the machine itself, can move laterally, steal banking information, etc., or steal the data itself. And then there also comes the ransomware attack, where the data that remains on the machine is encrypted, and then a ransom payment is demanded in order to decrypt the content. So, and these are very, very devastating and disruptive attacks when they happen in enterprises or actual organizations. And but again, the success of Emotet and the infection rate that we're seeing is what made it this pretty much this platform for other malware, even if in some cases that malware in itself is no longer as successful and as infectious as it used to be.
Yeah, it's like adding insult to injury almost,
Yes,
that
absolutely,
second wave.
absolutely.
Yeah. I suppose, too, I mean, this speaks to the sophistication but also patience of the developers of Emotet, that, they're willing to, part of their process is standing down for a little while to improve their tools, to improve their capabilities.
Absolutely, and I think that in the long run, it's worth their while in terms of the ultimate financial success and again, and ultimately money that they're making out of it. I think the way they're operating, as you said, with those periods of going under, in the long run is what makes them and what makes their operation more lucrative and more profitable. They have that that understanding that wasting all your ammunition and being exposed and transparent for a long period of time will actually make you less evasive, less infectious, and will allow the industry, the cybersecurity industry, more time to learn, to adapt to your operations and to your specific techniques and procedures. That understanding that one needs to go under for a little while in order to come back better and stronger is what makes them as successful. And again, over time. It's one thing to have a very, very successful specific attack, use that for as long as it may work, but then pretty much go detected by everybody and become your day-to-day known malware that has a very, very low success rate. That reorganization over long periods of times is really what makes, again, Emotet what it is today, and as successful as it is today.
And where do we stand in terms of people's ability to defend themselves against this? What are the most effective ways?
People and organizations that want to keep themselves safe from Emotet, there's several things that they can do. First of all, they need to understand and tell, I'd say, even speak the truth to themselves about their current security posture, what kind of solutions and protections they have in place. Test those against new Emotet waves or recent Emotet waves and samples as they become available, and see whether what they have today will defend them, at what stage of the attack chain it will defend them. It's better to be able to stop and thwart an Emotet attack at the dropper stage, at the spare phishing or malicious document attachment stage, rather than rely on the actual payload being prevented or something being prevented during runtime. In some cases, not in all cases, but in some cases, that would be too late. So first and foremost, my answer would be understand what is your current protection level against threats as sophisticated as Emotet, and with regards to the protection you have in place, where in the attack chain it's exactly found and how early it is. Because the earlier it is, the value, as far as the security value you'd gain from it, is much higher. Other than that, I think it's very, very important for for organizations to be very well informed of the actual, the TTPs, the techniques, the way the malware itself operates. They can do that by, getting themselves familiarized with the research content that's out there about Emotet and its behavior, so that in the case that they are infected, or they have a certain fear of being infected, they would know what exactly it is they need to look for. What are the assets that need to be, either disabled or protected first? Basically, to make sure they have all the knowledge and the right tool set in order to deal with, unfortunately, a potential Emotet attack. So those are the two main pieces of advice I would give to organizations. And there's a lot of research content and analysis out there about Emotet throughout its period of activity. But, by, research blog and research pieces like we've put out there, but also that a lot of other of our colleagues and competitors as well in the community have put out there. There's, there's ample amounts of materials available out there to get familiar with.
Our thanks to Shimon Oren from Deep Instinct for joining us. The research is titled Why Emotet's Latest Wave is Harder to Catch Than Ever Before. We'll have a link in the show notes. Thanks to Juniper Networks for sponsoring our show. You can learn more at juniper.net/security or connect with them on Twitter or Facebook. Thanks to Tanium for their sponsorship. Learn more about Tanium as a service and sign up for a 14-day free trial at tanium.com/cyberwire. The CyberWire Research Saturday is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Peru Prakash, Stefan Vaziri, Kelsey Bond, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.